Okay, this is the video for Thursday the 24th, January warm-up. And this is the file that I gave to the student in the OneNote document. So there was a grades CSV file. CSV stands for comma separated value file, and that's where the data is going to come from. Just remember that you cannot import data or get external data from it when you're in Excel from a file that is stored in OneNote. So I've had to take that file and store it locally. If you're at home, you might want to just save it on your desktop. If you're in the DSBN network, you're probably going to save it to your personal network drive, which is your M drive. Having said all of that, I want to get some data. So I'm going to click on data and get external data, and I'm getting it from a text file. So from text. So I'm going to go make sure I'm in my M drive, and I believe that I would have saved this file right here in grades. You can get a little bit of a preview of it in the right hand side if that's the way this dialog box is set up. So I'm going to hit import, and it should bring up the import wizard. It is a comma delimited file, which means that commas are going to be the things or the character that separates what information goes into column A, column B, and so on. I have to make a choice. If it looks like most of the data starts, the first row data starts in row 4, so maybe I want to start the import at row 4. My data has headers. If I ignore the first 3 rows, then there really is no headers in this data file, right? So there is headers in the Excel file that I'm importing into, so I guess my data doesn't have headers, especially if I don't import into row 4. If I go to next, you'll see that there's only one column here, even after I set comma as my delimiter. And that's because if you actually go back one step, you'll see that the actual file has double quotes around each row that I want to import. And when you have double quotes around text, basically that tells Excel to treat everything inside those double quotes as just characters. So there's no special meaning behind the comma anymore as a delimiter or something that is used to break the text into pieces. So I want to basically say, you know what, Excel, ignore the text qualifier. Ignore that the double quotes are serving that purpose. So I'm going to choose none. And what that means now is that the double quote is just a regular character, which means it is going to be put with the characters M-I-L-E-R in the first column for this person, and the last field is going to have, in this case, the letter B with a double quote. And there's nothing really we can do about that, but we will have to clean up the first and last column to get rid of those quotes. Double quotes, sorry. So I'm going to go next. And just an add-on that something in addition that we haven't talked about before is that if you look in my headers in the Excel file, there are 6 columns of information, but you see here there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's an extra column here, and it looks like this is your last name, or this is your student number, that's your last name, that's your first name, that's your math mark, your science mark, your English mark, but there doesn't really seem to be a need in our Excel file for this data column, which is the I guess the middle initial. So I'm just going to choose to skip it by clicking on Do Not Import Column, and it'll just hit skip here. From that point forward, I can hit Finish, and I'm going to import the data here, starting the top left corner in H2, only so that it doesn't get in my way of over here, which is where I want the data to eventually end up. So I'm going to pause for a moment and take any questions. All right, continuing on now, we see that there are definitely some columns that we have imported that don't need any work applied to them. So for example, I believe the student number field or column is pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to take this, and rather than copying and pasting, I'm just going to move this over, and I'm going to put it in the student number column. Okay? And it looks like first name is pretty clean. So again, I'm going to take first name and I'm just going to drag it over and drop it in column C, starting at row 2. Now, we've been having this discussion kind of off the video that these marks have spaces, right? And it's tough to figure out when, like, how would you know that? So you can do a variety of different things. You can trim up these to make sure there's no spaces in front. Unfortunately, this column here, there's spaces in front of all of these single letters. And we really only want the single letters. So what you might want to do, assuming these are your math marks, is you could use the trim function to trim it and get rid of the spaces. Or you could use the mid function and say, give me the second character and only the second character of each of these cells. I'm not here to tell you that one method is better than the other. I can do it both ways. So in here, if I want to trim up this cell, notice how the B is right up against the left edge, whereas here there's a space. Okay, and now I'm going to copy over, or sorry, fill down. Right? The other thing is if I double click here, notice how there's no space to get in the way from it sucking right up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control C, I'm going to copy, and when I paste those, I think that was my math marks, I don't want to paste the formula because remember these have the formula based in. I just want to paste the results of the formulas. Okay, and the only reason why this won't get any error is because of this here. So for that reason, or I can basically get rid of that if I want. And I'm done with these two. So I can get rid of these. Now there's no longer any result here because it's referencing K2, but I probably could just change that to L2 and do the same type of thing. So again, I'm going to hit copy, and I believe this is my science mark, and I'm going to paste the values. Now I'm done with the science mark or the second mark. So I'm going to get rid of that. So once again, I'm going to do a trim, but I'm going to trim this up. But I'm going to base it on M2. And that's going to clean up any spaces that I have. But now I've got this problem that it includes the double quote. So I want the leftmost character. So I'm going to do the left function of this, and I only want one character. And I'm going to get what I need. And I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to go over here, I'm going to paste just the values. And now I think I'm done with. What else do I need? Oh, we need last name, right? So that's all done. So I'm going to pause and take any questions. Okay, so the last thing we need to do here is we need to get the student's last name, but there's this double quote at the front. So probably, I would say most of you probably came to the point where you need the mid function to start getting the second character. The problem is you don't know how many characters to read because the strings are all of different length. So if I type in mid and I look at the dialog box, the first thing it's asking me what text I want to work with. So I'm going to click on that cell. And I want to skip over the first character. So my start number, I'm going to start at position 2. The problem is I don't know how many characters I want. So you can either put in a formula here, or if you want to think about, well, how many characters would I want to read here? Well, I'd want the M, the I, the L, the E, and the R. So I would want 5 characters. Well, how many would I want here? I'd want the G, the A, the L, the V, the I, the N. I want 6. Well, I'm certainly not going to have to count these all myself, but recognize that 5 is exactly one number less than the length, because I've basically calculated, or I've counted everything but the double quote. So maybe in this cell, I want to calculate the length of this cell, and then I want to subtract 1. And that'll get me my 5. And this should then, filling down, get me the number of characters that I want to read from this cell. Now, when I go to do mid, I can type on the text. I want to start at position 2, and the number of characters that I want to read is now sitting in this cell. And I got what I need. If I fill this down, it should give me what I want. At this point, with this selection already in place, I would Control-C to copy, and up here, I would paste my values. And I think we are done with all of this data. So I'm going to hit pause and take any questions.